On the 24th of November 1847, Charlotte Bronte publishes Wuthering Heights. It's an extremely ambitious book, and it's about a lot of things, but at the heart of it, it is a ghost story about how pain can haunt not just us, but those who come after us. 179 years later, a movie allegedly inspired by Wuthering Heights comes out to haunt us all, and today I'm about to be the 50th billionth person to bitch about it. But there's more than just bitching to do here. I feel like there is genuinely a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn about adaptation, there's a lot to learn about Emerald Fennell as a filmmaker, and there's a lot to learn about how 24 years old is just a little too up there in age to be dragged to watch a movie you don't even really want to watch, even if your friend is leaving the country in a month. Emerald Fennell said she wanted the movie to evoke a very primal response, and complaining is kind of the most primal thing I know how to do. Well, I'm sure people are sick of Wuthering Heights discourse, especially the bad ones. They haven't heard the bad discourse from me. Part 1. Failure as an adaptation. To grossly summarize the book in an insultingly simple way, this is about a man who basically goes to stay at a place called Wuthering Heights because he got stuck or some shit. And this property is owned by a man named Heathcliff, and he realizes that everybody who lives on this property, everybody's kind of mad as fuck. And at night, he gets shown to this room, and he opens this book, and he sees this, like, child's writing going Kathy Earnshaw, Kathy Linton, and Kathy Heathcliff, like, these three names. And he realizes, okay, this room belonged to someone called Kathy. Cool. And as he's sleeping, he gets visited by a ghost of someone who calls herself Kathy, and she begs to be let back into the home. The next morning, he wakes up and he's like, hey, what the fuck? There was a ghost? Can you explain what the hell is happening to me? And then Heathcliff gets super mad when he hears that it's Kathy, and he's like, no, fuck you. And so he gets the story from a maid named Nellie. So a long time ago, Heathcliff was adopted into Kathy's family and gets severely mistreated by Kathy's brother Hindley. And a significant amount of this abuse was, like, racialized in nature, basically. Kathy eventually marries their rich neighbor Edgar Linton, which causes Heathcliff to run away like a bitch. He didn't run away like a bitch, I'm sorry. That was kind of, yeah. Kathy eventually marries the rich neighbor Edgar Linton, which causes Heathcliff to run away. When he returns, he's rich and ready to wreck the shit out of everyone he feels ever wronged him, and also some people who are kind of technically not related to the situation, but still gets involved anyway. And he has this obsession with Kathy at the same time. He feeds into Kathy's brother's alcoholism and gambling addiction, which makes him extremely financially dependent on him, which is how he gets the control of the estate in the first place. He marries Isabella, who is Edgar's sister, and really just abuses her terribly. And eventually everyone except for Heathcliff dies, leaving him with Hindley's, Kathy and Edgar's, who's called Kathy Jr., by the way. I feel like that really couldn't have helped. And also his own child under his care. And the rest of the book is all of them just trying to move on from this horrible history that has plagued them. Okay, so quote-unquote Wuthering Heights 2026 by Emerald Fennell is a movie that probably shouldn't have tried to aspire towards open adaptation of something. It probably would have done better doing a Lion King or 10 Things I Hate About You, because then people won't think this is a travesty of ruining one of literature's most famous books. They'll just think, oh, this is just a really bad movie. The movie adapts the parts about Heathcliff and Kathy's childhood, but they remove Hindley as a character, so they just make the dad abusive. Heathcliff overhears Kathy saying that marrying Heathcliff would degrade him, and she accepted Edgar Linton's proposal, but he leaves before he hears that Kathy says she loves him for some reason. And Kathy's saying this to Nellie, who is fully aware that Heathcliff is listening in, and she's not particularly inclined to tell Kathy because she has a brain. And also, Kathy had just said something horribly rude to her, so who can blame her, really? And, okay, so Heathcliff leaves, and eventually Kathy marries Edgar Linton and moves into his house. So, in the movie, Isabella is not Edgar's sister, she is his ward, and it's mainly, I think, there to explain why she's white and he's not. And that's another thing we'll be touching on later. And basically after that, Heathcliff returns and he starts this affair with Kathy after some back and forth. Oh god, it's so boring. I'm sorry, like I get bored like describing the movie. I'm sorry. Anyway, so one day she's like, hey, I can't do this anymore. I'm pregnant with another person's child. I know it's not your child. It's Edgar's child. And then Heathcliff goes, okay, but this makes it better for me. It actually increases the amount of joy I get out of this. But Kathy just kind of stands her ground and she's like, no, I can't I can't really do this. Somehow, I don't remember, I am not rewatching this movie. She finds out that Nellie knew that Heathcliff was listening in on that day, and she goes to Nellie and she tells her, find employment elsewhere, even though it's essentially a death sentence for Nellie. And Nellie is like, okay, I need to maintain my position in this house. And she goes to Edgar Linton and she's like, hey, your wife is fucking behind your back. And like, just like that, the affair kind of just ends. In revenge, Heathcliff goes to marry Isabella behind everyone's back, but he straight up tells her, hey, I'm going to be thinking of Kathy every single day. I'm never going to treat you well. And she's like, yay, that's great. And that's how Isabella goes to live at Wuthering Heights. And then she starts to send Nellie these letters describing how badly she's being treated. And then Nellie tries to go to Wuthering Heights herself to try and get Isabella back. And she just finds them doing pet play all the time. And Isabella just kind of winks at her, being like, I'm in on it. Which I guess she is. She's been helping Heathcliff write these letters to make her situation seem much, much worse than it is in order to lure Kathy down to Wuthering Heights. But Nellie just kind of burns these letters because she's like, okay, these two are crazy, which is true. And she burns these letters. But Kathy keeps asking, like, oh, has he sent any letters? And the answer she always gets is no. And she starts wasting away because she's not eating. And eventually the baby dies inside her, but she's not very clear about it. Like, she's not really describing her medical situation well. It does seem like she's being, like, generally very dramatic. Nellie doesn't realize that the baby actually died, and she actually does start dying. And this is the best part where she's dying. I'm sorry. And it's not because she's like annoying. Well, it's not just because she's annoying, but that part of the movie is genuinely the best part of the movie. But some stiff fucking competition we have, right? Anyway, Kathy's on her deathbed and she whispers something into Nellie's ear. And Nellie goes to Wuthering Heights and she tells Heathcliff, hey, she's dead. And Heathcliff starts riding towards Wuthering Heights and Nellie just takes Isabella back home. And basically, this is so fucking stupid. I'm so sorry. I'm bored, like, talking about it myself. I can't imagine what it must be to, like, listen to this. So Heathcliff goes to Wuthering Heights. He sees Edgar covered in blood, and Edgar's like, oh no, don't go up there. You don't want to see her. She's dead. And Heathcliff is like, no, I have to go see her. And he goes up and he starts kissing her corpse. And he starts this speech that's very famous. It's the one where he's asking her to haunt him in any way possible. Come back as a ghost. Do whatever you need. It's a very famous speech, right? It's from the book. It's what whenever something's good, it's kind of from the book. And oh, doesn't that say something? And then the movie ends. And I just feel at the end of it, I just wasted so much time both watching and then recounting the movie, and then I also feel like I wasted your time. So maybe if you didn't watch the movie, you now have the full experience of what it was like. I know that the quotation marks were kind of the first thing a lot of people knew about this movie. It was to tell people that this isn't a straight adaptation of the book. It's a 14-year-old Emerald Fennell's complete misreading and bastardization of the source material. But I think that's stupid. I don't think quotation marks are enough to justify what I've seen. And I've seen some things. Okay, so this is kind of like going to those singing competitions and saying, I'm going to sing quote-unquote fireworks by quote-unquote Katy Perry. And then you sing the first line, do you ever feel like a plastic bag? And then you completely switch into your own original song. And you just keep going. And then I forgot what the last line of fireworks is. And then you switch back. Like, that's what it feels like to watch this movie. So Emerald Fennell calls Wuthering Heights her favorite book, which is crazy to me because I cannot fathom doing what she does to this movie to my favorite book. But her casting director calls it just a book in response to the kind of controversy that came up with Jacob Elordi's casting. So I'm not exactly sure how much reverence the general crew has for this material. I guess I shouldn't have been so confused. Yeah, they have the exact same amount of reverence, I feel, even though the tone in which they talk about is completely different. Let's talk about the themes of Wuthering Heights. There are many, but these are the ones that stand out to me particularly. The first one is racism, the second one is the cycle of violence and vengeance, and the third one is obsession. Let's talk about racism. So Heathcliff is a character that was explicitly described as dark skinned on like page 5. It's pretty fast. The guy enters Wuthering Heights and he's like, Oh, that man is dark skinned. Okay, so people say that what is considered dark skin has changed through time in Europe specifically, and I do think that is true, but that is not relevant, I think, for the character of Heathcliff because in the book there are parts where his appearance is tied to specific areas and ethnicities, and those aren't like what we consider white. Like that man is white, right? I just think that it's a shame that with the casting of Jacob Elordi, that part is completely gone. Well, not exactly, but we'll talk about it later. And the thing is, even if Charlotte Bronte had written Heathcliff to be this kind of maybe like Italian guy, I feel like obviously the point of the book is that he is being discriminated against for the color of his skin. And I think that as an adaptation, you should be able to kind of adapt that part for modern audiences, right? Nobody's going to look at Jacob Elordi and be like, yes, this is the man who's being discriminated against for his skin color. Like in the modern day, in the 21st century where we all live. Nothing about this movie is historically accurate, so I don't understand why people are using that particular defense. But anyway, with the casting of Jacob Elordi, that part is completely gone. The racism bit is completely gone. Well, not exactly, but we'll talk about it later. Next, the cycle of violence and vengeance. The kids have been adapted out of the movie, which I think is actually fine. I understand it completely, even though it flattens the generational aspects of like the cycles of abuse and things like that. I do think it was necessary considering the runtime of the movie and also movies being shorter as a medium, right? But I mean, you could argue that they could have used the runtime of the movie better, but whatever. Never mind. We'll talk about that later. I keep saying that, but it's true. We'll keep kicking that can down the road until we get there. Even the decision to combine Kathy's kind father and her abusive brother into one character, I do understand that choice, even though I think he's written so flatly that it's not really the adaptational choice, but rather just his writing in general that bothers me. I I'm not saying like I want a backstory and why he abuses his kids. I'm just saying he's just so incredibly boring. So my thing is, I'm not exactly sure how abuse shaped both of them. Yes, like their father, they are both terrible and boring, which is, a great double whammy, but not in a way that I feel like I can draw direct parallels to how Kathy and Heathcliff behave as adults. We see that both Kathy and Heathcliff have a temper and they're cruel to people, but I don't feel like their behavior and the ways they are cruel to people is a mirror of their father, nor are their coping mechanisms a good reflection of how their environment was as children. This theme is also not very well explored because people they're cruel to are usually framed as deserving it somehow. The father was an abusive drunk, Nellie drove a wedge between them, and Isabella literally consents to being treated badly by Heathcliff, so it doesn't really stand well on that theme. And if we look at how Heathcliff actually executes his so called revenge, it's pretty nothing. Like, it feels like dust to me because it doesn't feel like anybody is actually at risk. So his first victim is the father, and he is already drinking himself to death in their childhood. So it doesn't exactly feel like Heathcliff particularly enables anything. And additionally, the set design and the color palette of during the childhood and after the childhood Wuthering Heights, it doesn't change that much. Like, yes, afterwards it becomes a bit colder and there's less light, and also there's just stuff all over the place. Just stuff. But it doesn't look dramatically different enough that I feel like there is that big of a decline. And Heathcliff's second kind of victim and pawn in this vengeance plot is Isabella. But the thing is, Isabella is unlikable throughout the whole movie. At first, she's stupid, she's just stupid. But then she escalates into being stupid and also vindictive. I don't feel that much when I see her in bad situations because she seems to want to be there. She's enjoying herself. So there's not really a sense that Heathcliff is doing things that people don't actually want him to do. There's no risk to anything. There's no danger in what he's doing. The only reason why anyone is in actual danger of this movie is because Kathy stopped eating. And yes, in the book, Kathy wasted away, but the rest of them, they actually had to contend with like consumption and shit. In the movie, you're kind of wondering why Heathcliff has showed back up. You don't know what he's doing. So after the movie, my friend said that one of her biggest problems with the movie was that you never really know why they can't get together. Like, yes, Kathy is married already, but she was like, why can't they just get divorced? And I was saying, like, oh, divorce maybe was a bit trickier back then. But it existed, definitely, right? I mean, you would probably have to get Edgar to want to divorce Kathy, but it definitely existed. So why not? And then you realize that I don't think Heathcliff actually asked Kathy to leave her husband. Like, he only implies that, yeah, I want to marry you. And then he offers to kill her husband, but in a way that I don't believe that he would do it. Like, I believe he would pussy out. So what the hell do we have left? Obsession. I want to be very, very brave and say something. Obsession isn't romance. The same way a stan isn't in a romantic relationship with their idol, and the same way that you can be obsessed with a book but not understand it at all, it seems. What does the movie say about this? Okay, for the sake of discussion, we are going to have to ignore some things, the antics, the stunts that's been pulled during the marketing of this film. We are going to ignore the fact that they tried to market the film by implying that Margot Robbie, a married woman, was extremely emotionally codependent on her co-star Jacob Elordi. We are going to ignore the fact that Emerald Fennell made shrines of both of her leads to give to the other. It is weird as fuck, but we will ignore it for the sake of discussion for now. So, Wuthering Heights, the book is not about romance, right? And in a way that I think is completely unintentional because it goes against every bit of marketing and interviews of this film I've seen so far. The film actually isn't either. The book is staunchly about obsession. Heathcliff is so obsessed with Kathy that he begs to be haunted by her just to have her by his side just a little longer. And his whole drive for vengeance is motivated by a dual urge to both ruin and possess her. But it doesn't really play into the themes of obsession. And the film isn't about romance because there is no love between the two of them. The movie uses the most famous lines from the book where you could really feel the obsession and maybe even the deep love that these two have for each other, with Kathy comparing their souls and Heathcliff begging Kathy to haunt him. But their relationship never really progresses that much past sex. I don't feel the weight of their obsession or their romance, which means we genuinely have so little left to talk about thematically. There is a genuine inability to capitalize on any theme on the book well, like at all. And it makes me feel like Emerald Fennell can't read. And it's crazy because this was a $20 million way, excluding marketing, to publicly announce the fact that you're illiterate. I am not even asking for a faithful adaptation. I am just asking for a good one. You do not need to follow the book to a T. I am not one of those purists that are like, oh, you need to adapt every single thing from a book. No, you can change the characterization if you want. You don't even necessarily need to agree with the themes. There's a reason why I'm discussing the themes of the book instead of thematic statements, because I'm not asking the movie to have the same take on those themes. But surely, as an adaptation, you have to engage with one of the themes, at least one of them, in a decent way. Surely it's not too much of me to expect that when you're doing an adaptation, you have to replace whatever you took out from the book with something just as or even more interesting than what's in it. Surely you can use this change in medium to say something true and interesting about at least one of those themes that were brought up. So, what is Wuthering Heights 2026 actually about? I think that opening scenes are very important to how you're supposed to read the film. And Emerald Fennell has explicitly said, like I've mentioned already, that this was based on a horny 14-year-old reading that she did. Oh, I'm sorry, it's so painful. It's so painful. The opening scene of the movie is a man being hanged, and he's jizzing himself on the way out. When he does, the crowd goes wild and starts getting your freak shit on. Cool. So this movie is about the relationship between sex and death, right? At least part of it should be. The last shot is even Heathcliff finally in bed with Kathy after several montages of fucking everywhere except in bed, but now she's dead. So this might sound bad, especially in conjunction with what I'm about to say about Emerald Fennell later, but this has basis in the book. I think this scene didn't go far enough. There's a scene in the book where essentially Heathcliff commands Kathy's coffin to kind of be exhumed, and he throws himself onto it, and there's certain sexual implications to what's happening. And the thing is, in this scene, he's just kind of kissing her in the movie, which is what most of the sex scenes actually were. It was actually mostly them kissing. It didn't really show anything that explicit, I feel, which is fine, I guess. It just to me, it just doesn't really say anything meaningful about the relationship between sex and death, except that sometimes one precedes the other. That's such a boring thematic statement, right? Sometimes sex happens before death and vice versa. You needed 2.5 hours to tell me that? And also, sex keeps coming up in ways that like means so little. It means nothing. Like one of the things that I remember the most about the movie is just the stupidity of the penis book. That's a new sentence. So Isabella gives Kathy this book with pop-up genitalia, and it doesn't really say anything about their relationship beyond Isabella being horny. And I think at most you could be like, oh, Isabella kind of has a crush on Kathy that just evaporates the moment Heathcliff arrives. And so, like, what's the point of that? It's supposed to be shocking, but it's also not that shocking. Like, it's as shocking as seeing a teenage boy draw a dick. And we've all seen that plenty of times before, right? And I think that's one of Emerald Fennell's genuine problems as a director. Let's talk about it. Part 2, Shock Value. So, a very big criticism of Fennell's body of work is that she overuses shock value, kind of for the sake of it. So, I know a lot of people are probably thinking about moments of maybe unnecessarily graphic sexual content, and while I do mean those, I also mean other things. So, stories work on two levels, right? There's the literal and this is the figurative. Yes, defeating the dragon in the story is a symbol of defeating greed and evil on a figurative level, but on a very literal level, there is a giant lizard in your house and you must kill it. Emerald Fennell's previous works, I think, work okay, maybe on a literal level for most of the runtime, where you think, yeah, okay, I'm just kind of going along with the story and the characters, and then at the end, in order to get one over the audience, she shits on them in order to kind of squeeze in something that doesn't work for the story on both a literal and a figurative level. It completely changes how you read the rest of the film, but not in a cool or interesting way, but in a way that makes you just kind of sour. It's a little like the Game of Thrones ending where they were just trying to outsmart the audience, and with this, we do need to talk about Saltburn. So Saltburn is a film that earned Emerald Fennell a lot of attention. Some people saw Promising Young Woman, but like a lot of people saw Saltburn. It's allegedly what earned her the creative freedom to do whatever the fuck she wanted with Wuthering Heights, which is so rare for filmmakers nowadays that I feel like it's really important to discuss Saltburn in relation to Wuthering Heights. So Saltburn is a film that has really stuck with me. It is visually gorgeous in both production design and cinematography. It's pretty well acted, and it presents some genuinely interesting character psychologies. And none of these are the reason why I remember this film. The themes of Saltburn are really interesting because there's so much discourse around it. Is it an eat the rich film in line of things like Knives Out and The Menu, or is it a film that kind of confirms the anxieties of the wealthy that anybody poorer than them that they let into their lives, especially the middle class, is secretly trying to leech off them and kind of usurp them? And this is a discussion that's made quite potent by the fact that Emerald Fennell is the daughter of an extremely famous and rich celebrity jeweler. My take on this is, neither? So to me, Saltburn shits the bed like here, which is pretty far into the movie, though it's definitely been lightly shotting throughout parts of the movie before this, but this really just confirmed it to me. In my viewing of this movie, I felt like this was a story about one guy who was so extremely in love with another guy that he would have done anything to just have a piece of him. Someone who's so in love with a person that they're willing to lick every bit of them from the tub or to have them only in proxy via their sister and mother, and to kill them before they lose them. It was essentially doing Wuthering Heights better than the actual Wuthering Heights movie was, because it also includes a scene of grave fucking, which is great. To me, it read like Barry Keoghan's character was so in love with Jacob Elordi that he wanted to be as close to him as possible forever, even if it meant becoming him, or I guess, his dad. So imagine my fucking surprise when he starts monologuing about how some people aren't willing to work or some shit. I was like, where's this coming from? I know this character is a liar, but I don't think this character was lying to the person who was going to die in minutes or deluding himself. It just felt like a very weird turn for the character because the movie, to me, didn't feel like him working his way up. Maybe working his way in, but definitely not up. Not really. He jumps from person to person, seemingly with very little plan at all. And, okay, so in order to talk about what Saltburn could have meant, we need to talk about the three most talked about scenes in Saltburn, right? The ones that made people go, oh my god, you gotta watch this, it's so freaky. And I'm just like, no, not really, but okay, we'll get to that. The first is the blood scene where Barry Keoghan is eating the sister out on her period. Then there's the tub scene, and then there's the aforementioned grave scene where he's fucking Jacob Elordi's grave. Like mentioned before, the tub scene and the grave scene works okay if my reading of obsession being the primary theme is correct, but according to the movie, it is not. I'm supposed to read it as a talented Mr. Ripley Parasite crossover. If I do take the movie the way it wants me to, where it's about wealth and class and the transgression of those boundaries, the blood in the tub scene maybe could be read as like a middle class consuming the upper, but then why did he pretend to be of a lower socioeconomic background than he actually was? Why did he fuck that grave weeping like a toddler in Disneyland? This movie really falls apart the moment you try and think about it beyond a surface level, and I felt like, oh my god, am I being too generous considering how edgy these scenes are? And then I realized I absolutely am. Because I found out that Emerald Fennell wrote the book for Bad Cinderella. For those of you who don't know, this book is basically the script part of a musical. And for those of you who don't know what Bad Cinderella is, I wish I was you. Basically, it's a really toothless Andrew Lloyd Webber musical where Cinderella is bad because she wears old clothes and she says naughty things, and sometimes she spray paints the statue of her best friend's dead brother, which I guess is actually bad, but it's portrayed more of an anti establishment thing as opposed to you have greatly hurt your grieving friend thing. It's very uninspired and it says nothing, and it takes the veneer of audacity and shock to ultimately say nothing, which is, you know, a common trait, it seems. So let's take a break. We're almost at the halfway point before I really get into the real meat of my issues with this movie. And I think a lot of people might criticize me for saying, oh, why can't I just enjoy this movie? Why must English majors be such a wet fucking blanket that I can't even enjoy a simple movie that I paid a ticket for? And I would say, firstly, I would hope that in the past couple of minutes that you've spent listening to me, I hope that you can tell that from the lack of my intelligence, I hope you can tell that I am not and was not an English major. Secondly, I'll be getting into why it's a bit hard for me to enjoy the movie on both a technical and also just the problems level. And thirdly, I love being a wet blanket. Guys, I love it. I love it so much. But I'm gonna do something special for you guys, and we're gonna do some roleplay. I would say together, but it's not together, it's by myself. So, I do think it is almost a travesty to fully divorce an adaptation from its source. But let's just play pretend for today that it isn't allegedly inspired or adapted from one of Gothic literature's most seminal works. Let's pretend that the most interesting thing about this movie isn't how it fails its source material. Let's just pretend that this is a movie that's been formed and fully fell out of Emerald Fennell's brain. Okay? It's still not a very good movie. Okay, characters and plot. So, I already kind of described how I felt like the plot was really thin. It felt like things were happening to me, not even to the characters. It felt like things were happening to me. And it didn't feel like one thing really led to the other. It just felt like characters showed up, characters left, characters show up somewhere else. So, I think it's more important to talk about the quality of the whole point of this adaptation, right? It's the sex. It's what 14-year-old Emerald Fennell thought the book was and based this entire movie off, so let's talk about it. I think sex in movies is like any other scene. It's a tool. It's a tool to move the plot forward or to tell me who these characters are. There's been a greater rise in more erotic movies after 50 Shades of Grey kind of broke that dam wide open. And I think audiences maybe need to demand more from their sex scenes. I remember watching 50 Shades with my friends because we thought it was going to be funny and we were just bored. I was watching The Housemaid recently, and okay, the sex scene is well coordinated, the scene is in focus, but it really did feel like two hot Barbie dolls kind of being clacked together because to me, they could have been any of those two characters. There was no real moment where I felt like I was connecting to them as people or their new relationship. Wuthering Heights suffers from the exact same problems. One of the most famous lines in the book that got transplanted into the script is, whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And I guess I have to ask, what are their souls made of? Because this is the most boring, lifeless rushing I've ever seen on the big screen. I don't actually believe that anyone in this movie is feeling real pleasure, maybe except for Isabella, who doesn't actually have on screen sex, and Zilla, the housemaid whose sexual experience where she pretends to be a horse, which is like fun, it's cool. She pretends to be a horse, and it's basically not actually about her. It's about Kathy's sexual awakening. But the thing is, Kathy's viewing this like sadomasochistic like thing as her sexual awakening, and then she proceeds to have the most lifeless vanilla sex on earth for the rest of her life. The lack of pleasure could be something interesting you could talk about, but I know that's really not the intention here. Most of the sex things that weren't vanilla sex was mainly there for shock value, and if you've been on the internet for longer than 2 seconds, I think you wouldn't be that shocked. Another thing is, I don't believe that any of them are that attracted to each other. I think the only moment that I truly believe, oh, this character here is genuinely attracted to the person they're having sex with, is Edgar, and we're supposed to read that scene as him being unable to live up to Kathy's fantasies of Heathcliff, right? And this thing gets to the heart of what ruins kind of any possible enjoyment I could get out of this film, in my opinion, is that Kathy and Heathcliff just really do not work in the film. I don't know why they love each other. I don't even know why they like each other. I don't ever feel like they could spend time with each other and enjoy each other's company, because in the scenes that they aren't fucking, it feels like I'm watching them not really react to what each other is saying. I don't buy them as in love or even obsessed with each other, which is what the whole film really kind of hinges on. The thing about writing romance is that you can't really just rely on your actors to be hot together, or even them having chemistry. While some actors can definitely elevate middling scripts through the power of chemistry, it kind of has to be there in the writing. If I read a screenplay, I should know why these two love and like each other, and I just really don't. Low-key, I actually think the child actors had better chemistry. I believe they liked each other more. Maybe because they delivered everything with just like a little bit more energy that didn't make me feel like I was constantly at risk of falling asleep. Like Margot Robbie was doing like the brashy thing, but coming from like a, these characters are kind of meant to be younger, but they aren't really cast in an age appropriate manner. So it just doesn't really like sit well. It feels like she was just kind of throwing a tantrum for the sake of it, but not like genuinely feeling it. And then Jacob Elordi just seems to be almost sleepwalking. All this fuss about him, and he's just not very good. I'm so sorry, but he just wasn't particularly good to me. Also, his accent, like, it sounded like fine. It sounded comfortable, like it sounded real. But he did also constantly sound like he was about to keel over at any moment, which did make me a bit nervous for him. The only actor I really genuinely liked was Hong Chao as Nelly, and we'll get to that soon. Also, a side thought, but I guess I thought that, it's a bit weird that in a movie that's marketed towards women, I feel like we don't really see scenes that are focused on women's pleasure. Like, there's not a single scene of a woman getting eaten out, which is crazy to me. Kathy and Heathcliff just have the most lukewarm sexual encounters with each other. This isn't me saying that there aren't small nuggets of things to like. I think the Blue Room scene where Kathy and Heathcliff are using Isabella as a pawn against each other is pretty okay. It's the only real scene with teeth that treats the characters as like the terrible people they actually are, but it kind of goes and undermines it from the moment they do get together, because it feels like it forgets this part about their character, and I'm just supposed to shut up and enjoy watching them fuck or whatever. And in the general arc of the movie, it ends up framing their relationship as something very beautiful, especially in the end when Heathcliff is weeping over Kathy's corpse, and we see a montage of them as children, which makes you feel like the love story is something beautiful. When it's like not. You've just shown me it's not. The guy next to me in the cinema was like crying over it, and I was like, dude, save your tears. This is not worth it. Wuthering Heights is not worth it. And afterwards, his girlfriend asked him, hey, why are you crying? And he said, I don't know. The only time these two are not boring to me is when they're being actively awful, and it's kind of a hit or miss thing. Some other moments where they're being awful is just an absolute miss for me. Um, oh, that was meant to be positive. Okay. Okay, the cinematography, I think they made some very beautiful sequences and images. I think the way they used catchlights were very beautiful to me. I think the very fake soundstage-esque way they designed and lit Wuthering Heights as a place, especially during the childhood, was a very interesting choice to highlight the very false circumstances that Heathcliff and Kathy fall in love with and how it can't last. I don't actually enjoy the way it looks, but it is an interesting choice. I'll give them that. I also think that any scenes with mist involved were well lit and shot. I know that's a pretty hard like condition to shoot well. The scenes with the leeches is also very, very cool. It was very visually striking. There's actually quite a few visually striking shots here, especially with the use of color in the set designs and doorways and windows to frame characters. I do think that Emerald Fennell consistently makes very visually beautiful films and works well with her cinematographer. I do wish that maybe there was like a little more grit in the way that things are presented, considering what kind of movie this was supposed to be. But there were so many issues with the film that I can't even really complain about that too much, can I? Editing. This movie has such an incredible pacing issue, both from like a scene to scene level and like a shot to shot level. It spends way too much time on them sneaking around and fucking when it really should be spending more time convincing me that they're in love. That I felt a little crazy to maybe suggest that you spend a bit more time on character development from like a shot to shot basis, like a moment to moment basis. There's also these moments where characters erupt in anger, which makes sense. It's a movie with quite a few angry characters, right? But it always feels very abrupt and not in a way that I feel was intentional because we never really see the characters build to that anger. It's always them saying a normal sentence and then there's a cut and suddenly they're yelling in a way that pisses me off. You can't even be like, oh, it's explosive anger because it doesn't feel like that either. It just feels very, very abrupt in a very, very strange way. There were so many montages I felt like just didn't move the relationship forward, as I've mentioned quite a few times already. Because it's doing a lot of the same thing, which is just Kathy bouncing on it that makes me feel like I'm watching paperwork. Whenever this happened, I could feel my eyes just kind of gently glaze over. But in a way, it was good because no one was talking, so I could just have a bit of peace to myself. Okay, production design and costumes. I know there's been a lot of talk about the costumes, about how it's not historically accurate. My issue isn't that the costumes are not period typical. I think it's often fun to fuck around with period accuracy. My issue with the costumes is that they are ugly, and they are ugly in an unmotivated way. There is a visual change when Kathy goes from being Kathy Earnshaw to Kathy Linton, where the clothes go from being like tackier and with shorter sleeves to something a little more refined and high fashion in its silhouette. But even after the change happens, I feel like the tackiness is still there. There are some incredibly tacky choices, like the giant bejeweled cross or the overly shiny fabric of her hood that makes it look like a costume. The colors don't even change that much, and the use of anachronistic material doesn't really change either, because she shows up looking like a fucking gift bag. It's my same complaint of what I've seen of Christopher Nolan's Odyssey so far, where the choices of what's anachronistic and what's not seems really strange, unmotivated, and kind of annoying to me. But I do really enjoy the wedding dress. I do like how the veil clings to Margot Robbie. I think the shot is really beautiful. It's also why things like Kathy's costume not changing in a consistent way before and after her marriage confuses me, because the wedding dress doesn't really use the visual language of either. The set is also really interesting to me. There are some fun details, like a fishbowl being the banister of some stairs in a garden, but there's also some things that are so overkill. The stucco relief of a billion hands crawling up the fireplace looks so bad. It was so hideous, and it took me out of the film every time I saw it. It also doesn't really tell me anything about Edgar Linton, because I feel like, yes, he's rich, but he's not tacky like that. That's Kathy's job, and that was already there before she arrived. That part just stood out to me in a way that I was like, okay, that doesn't fit the rest of the house at all. It doesn't tell me anything about the character. Maybe it could be a reference to being like, oh, dragged to hell. But why that house then? Why not Wuthering Heights? Never mind about that, I guess. Another thing, oh my god, okay, this is my favorite thing in the movie. Okay, this thing made me laugh out loud in the movie. I think it was the only thing that brought me a genuine sense of joy. Okay, so when the alcoholic dad finally kicks it, they're standing over his body, and then the shot reverses, and we see these two big fucking piles of bottles in the corner, and it made me genuinely laugh so hard. It's like, I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards. Okay, the last part, the music. So I feel like I actually had pretty high expectations for the use of music. I thought maybe it'll be something like the 2013 adaptation of The Great Gatsby, where the soundtrack was just like modern pop songs, but they were adapted into jazz and blues. Or even something like Challenges, where Charlie XCX's experience in electronic pop production could give this, frankly, quite boring movie a sort of beating heart. But no, it's actually pretty standard. It didn't really stand out that much. Okay, so break time is over. Let's get to the real problems. So, I lied. I do think that Emerald Fennell can read. She just doesn't care. Because there's two options to this scenario, right? The first is that she had such poor literacy at the age of 14, and then grew up and thought that such a bad understanding of the book could be made into something good. And that is possible. The second is that she knew that this would be a bad idea, that people would probably react badly to this decision, but then she decided to go ahead with it anyway. And considering her history of doing things that are intentionally trying to shock people, I'm personally really leaning towards the second interpretation. She's not an unintelligent or a poorly read person. She says this is her favorite book in the world, right? Which is crazy to me because, like I said, I would never do this to my favorite book in the world. She went to Oxford. She's quoted literary papers in her one-on-one interview with the National Board of Review. She's filled her film and its marketing with references to other films like Gone with the Wind for the poster and the corset scene. The color grading of this specific scene is also kind of reminiscent of Gone with the Wind, and it also looks quite different from every other shot in the film. The reason why I keep bringing up Gone with the Wind specifically is because it's a very famously racist film. It's often been compared to another very racist film called The Birth of a Nation, where the whole premise is what if the KKK were the good guys? So you kind of get how bad this is, right? You kind of get how bad the impact of Gone with the Wind is. So I guess my question to Emerald Fennell is why reference this movie at all in a story where the book you're adapting your film from is referenced as dark-skinned? It feels a little pointed, right? Okay, additionally, this part might be a bit conspiratorial, but Emerald Fennell described Elodie as looking exactly like the illustration of Heathcliff in the first book she read. Fine, whatever. I can't believe there was a white Heathcliff on a book illustration years ago. But the thing is, Kathy in the book, she has dark hair. And it's not me being like, oh my god, they changed this feature of a character. But it's explicitly kind of important thematically because she shares the same kind of dark hair and dark eyes, but not the skin of Heathcliff, right? And so it's kind of meant to be she's straddling these two worlds. And then when she gets married to the Lintons, she has a child, and her child has the kind of fairer features of her husband. And that detail is important in talking about class in the book. But then Emerald Fennell goes and casts an actress with the same blonde hair and blue eyes that she has. It makes me feel like she was aware of all of this, and she's aware of all these small details, but she's more concerned with both the self-gratification and the attention from controversy. Things like this is the reason why I can't really give her the benefit of the doubt that everything wrong with this movie is just some hapless person who didn't know better. That's why I don't think I can really accept her 14-year-old horny misreading of the book explanation. So no, let's look at this like actual adults. So for the next part, I'm going to be diving into what I find to be bad about Wuthering Heights 2026 that goes deeper than the technical problems. I think it's going to be worse than desecrating the legacy of one of the most important pieces of Gothic literature of all time, and also worse than wasting my fucking time. I hate this movie so much, sorry. Anyway, let's talk about it. The first problem is going to be the racism. I know a lot of things has been said about Jacob Elordie's casting and how it undermines a lot about the book, but I also want to talk about how his casting has kind of a wider ripple effect on how we're supposed to read the film. Because there are characters of color in the film, just not the one character of color that's like canonical. Nellie's a Southeast Asian woman in this, and I'll speak more on that later, and Edgar Linton is played by Shahzad Latif, who's an actor of Pakistani descent, right? And in the book, Heathcliff is described to be racially ambiguous, but one quote, it says, "Who knows, but your father was Emperor of China and your mother an Indian queen." So it's quite possible that he could have been South Asian. So I just want to ask, why was his character race swapped with Edgar Linton? Like, isn't that weird? Like, isn't it weird that now the rich and powerful man is this South Asian man and the one destitute guy is this random white guy? The only man of color is painted as this very ineffectual husband who is getting literally cucked. Kathy kisses Heathcliff through a window, but because he can't see, like, he's standing right there. And after he finds out about the affair, he's mad, but not in a way that has any nuance. He's just kind of mad in a very flat way. And I just want to remind you that this is a character that was genuinely in love with Kathy. He should be contending with his own heartbreak, but he doesn't. He's just extremely flat and mad afterwards. Even after his own wife dies with his unborn child, he has to still be a prop to these two white people's story, and he doesn't get his own moment of grief that we truly feel the gravitas. He has to go outside and he has to tell Heathcliff, no, you don't want to see my dead wife. For your own sake, Heathcliff, don't see my dead wife's corpse. And then he just lets this guy go and like kiss his dead wife's corpse over and over and over again. It's also really weird that like, okay, there are three characters in the movie that gets in the way of the general romance we are allegedly supposed to be rooting for, right? It's Isabella, it's Nellie, and it's Edgar. Isabella seems to get a kind of a pass on this, even though she's the one who literally married Heathcliff, because she's portrayed as so ineffectual and naive, and honestly a little too stupid to live, that the people who end up getting in the way intentionally is Edgar and Nellie, who are, you know, the two characters of color in this film, which is crazy to me. Additionally, I feel like these are the two characters with the least agency. They don't really get to make stupid decisions like every other character gets to. Instead, they're kind of like victims to their hapless whims. The racial dynamics of the film is just very strange to me, and it seems like it was done on purpose. It's extremely distasteful that this was how Emerald Fennell chose to, you know, cast and then write these characters. Next, my issue with the sex. This part isn't to complain about the quality of the sex, because we've already done that. We all know it's not very good. What I want to talk about is how the movie bastardizes the idea of consent. So, in the book, Isabella Linton is a victim of domestic abuse. In the movie, she is also still a victim of domestic abuse. The difference is that this movie has her not only just consenting to her abuse over and over again, but she's actively conspiring with her abuser in exchange for sexual gratification and degradation. So the scene I'm talking about is the one where after Kathy breaks off the affair with Heathcliff, he's really, really mad, and he goes to piss her off by proposing to Isabella. As he invades her room, he tells her that he's going to be horrible, monstrous, just real dog shit to her. Is she okay with that? It's obviously a really twisted way of presenting the discussion of what should precede all sexual activity. You could argue it's intentionally like that. It's meant to be a horrible reflection of how unhealthy BDSM relationships can be if they're not done right. The thing is, she agrees over and over again, and not only does she agree over and over again, she actively enjoys the mistreatment. She winks at Nellie when she walks in on them doing pet play. She's so okay with her husband never loving her or even treating her with a modicum of decency or care that she's like, when they get married, she's like fine that he doesn't kiss her. And I think because it has this element of enjoyment, we're supposed to see this as like an empowering woman's choice thing. But this isn't exactly empowering or sexy or fun to see an abuse victim enjoy her abuse so much, especially because in the book she runs away with a child because Heathcliff is too much. This whole change to Isabella really absolves away the monstrousness of Heathcliff, which is, you know, the point. How can his revenge work or feel like revenge when Isabella is partaking in this so happily? And okay, so we have to talk about Nellie now. So Nellie to me as a character is kind of this intersection where these two issues of sex and racism kind of rear their ugly head. Emerald Fennell claims her interpretation of Nellie goes something like this. You know when you watch someone go down to a basement in a horror movie and you yell, "Don't go down to the basement." That's what Nellie is doing. She's the older sister. She's trying to keep things on the rails. Would you let your two most incompetent lunatic friends plan the course of your life? And this is an interpretation that I actually really like. Yes, Nellie may be unreliable as a narrator in the book, but she's ultimately subject to the whims of those in power above her, much like Heathcliff is. And the thing is, she might even be more so because Heathcliff is able to go leave and make his fortune, whereas it will be a death sentence for Nellie. Had Heathcliff been casted with a more appropriate casting, making her a woman of color isn't even that bad of an idea in regards to exploring this. Having the theme of how gender and just having the right person's favor at the right time could really affect your quality of life could be kind of interesting, and it could be good to explore in some sort of movie that was good. We even have some really sympathetic moments with her. The way that Hong Xiao's eyes shine with tears when she gets told that she has never loved anyone, nor has she been loved by anyone, is really, really sad. When she asks where she would go when Kathy tries to throw her out of the house, only for Kathy to reply with, "I don't care." The way that a child version of Nellie looks out longingly when Kathy and Heathcliff run out without her, these are all things that should make us feel for her, especially with the framing of these scenes, often making her in lower, more powerless positions or separate from other characters. But the thing is, this movie doesn't really have the space and the complexity to sympathize with both Kathy and Heathcliff's boring fucking love story and Nellie's story. And considering it's meant to focus on the love story, it definitely doesn't end up on Nellie's side. Yes, Nellie has sympathetic moments in this film, but she's definitely still kind of painted to be a villain. Kathy accuses her of enjoying seeing her cry, and she replies, "Not as much as you enjoy crying." It's meant to be kind of read as this like S&M power dynamic thing, right? The thing is, we don't really ever see Nellie take real enjoyment out of Kathy's suffering, even though she has every right to. It's just a blatantly false lie that Kathy comes up with to kind of justify this to herself, and also because she's a bad person. She's meant to be a bad person, remember? And the thing is, Nellie never makes her do anything. Kathy says that Nellie has betrayed her because she didn't tell her that Heathcliff was eavesdropping, and which led to Heathcliff leaving, right? But is Nellie genuinely at fault for the things that Kathy says and the fact that Heathcliff leaves before the end of the sentence? The only thing she really did was so incredibly passive, which is not saying anything. And honestly, like, if I had to be told by a white woman that I have never loved and also has never been loved, on top of having to grow up with them, I would have run them over with a horse a long time ago. I am so fucking serious about this. Nellie's never enjoying what's happening because I think she's just not allowed to. She's just constantly thinking from a self preservation point of view for both Kathy and herself. She's not even showing any real enjoyment when Kathy's demanding Nellie to squeeze her to death via corset. And honestly, I think I would have actually loved a version of the movie where she was trying to actually increase Kathy's suffering. God, please take all of Nellie's suffering and then give it to Kathy. The movie doesn't actually do enough to refute the idea that Nellie's purposefully intensifying Kathy's suffering. She's constantly still portrayed as a villain. For example, the very first scene with Isabella in it is a scene where she's trying to explain to Edgar Romeo and Juliet, and she's like, "Oh, I think the nurse is actually the villain for keeping the letters away from Romeo." And that's basically almost exactly what happened, except the letters were being kept away from Kathy by Nellie. Isabella is less than brainless in this movie, so you can argue that we're not actually supposed to be taking her seriously. But the rest of the movie plays this parallel extremely straight. And like I said, they don't try and refute the idea that she did this on purpose to hurt Kathy. The times where she's doing the most to prevent Heathcliff's and Kathy's romance, things like burning Heathcliff's manipulative letters full of lies, is when she's also trying to fix everyone else's problems by herself. But also, it's the time that we're supposed to be in the most mournful headspace with Kathy for losing Heathcliff. We're supposed to feel bad that these two cannot be together even though we don't fucking care about them. So clearly we aren't supposed to be siding with Nellie here. And I think the cherry on top of all of this is the final scene with Kathy and Nellie. So it's basically Kathy whispering something to Nellie, and we as the audience, we don't find out what that is. We don't get to hear it. But based on how Hong Chao plays it, I think it is Kathy forgiving Nellie for allegedly being the one to get in between her and Heathcliff. And to me, this leaves an incredibly sour taste in my mouth. Maybe it's just me, but I don't enjoy seeing a more privileged white woman tell a Southeast Asian woman who has so little autonomy in this society that she's unlovable and also has never loved anyone, and then threaten her entire livelihood, and then be the one to tell her, "Oh, actually, I forgive you for getting in the way of the world's most tepid romance." Sorry, not even romance, affair, for not realizing that Kathy miscarried because she was not being clear that she actually did lose the baby, and then for the film to somehow frame that as correct. It just really, really pisses me off. The movie is so determined to be on Kathy's side, even when it's in Nellie's perspective. I also just want to point out that she is the only woman in the film that doesn't get to have a sexual or a romantic experience. All the other women in the film, who all just happen to be white, get to. Even the fucking nun at the hanging in the very first scene has like an orgasm when the guy gets hanged. And so when Nellie is being accused of never loving and never being loved, it just feels like, what does that say? That the only woman of color is the only one who doesn't get to partake in this pretty human experience? And then she's portrayed as being quite cold and a little unfeeling and sometimes unimportant. It feels bad, right? Am I crazy? Doesn't it feel bad because it isn't even portrayed as she doesn't want romance or she doesn't want love or she doesn't want sex or she's a prude. It's just that this desire for human connection, which she clearly wants to, isn't really explored in any way except getting to look upset when she's not included. And she's not really afforded the same amount of interiority and attention that her white counterparts who get to pretend to be like a dog and a horse and shit get. I just don't really enjoy this. So finally, I just kind of want to talk about the turn your brain off crowd, right? A lot of people, when they were like, oh, why can't we just turn our brain off? Specifically in regards to the casting of Jacob Elordi, a lot of people who like Jacob Elordi, and I'm not saying like I don't like him as an actor. I think he's fine. Like he's good. He clearly can act in certain circumstances. A lot of people who does enjoy Jacob Elordi says that, hey, why can't I just turn my brain off? And my thing is, in the Simon and Schuster release of Wuthering Heights that was introduced by Emerald Fennell, the cover has like a leather thing on it. So it's like it basically echoes the same S&M theme that is in the movie, but the thing is, it is not in the book. This continued insistence on flattening the legacies of one of the greatest authors of all time just really doesn't sit right with me. And a lot of people say that, oh, people are just criticizing her specifically because she's a woman, that this movie was directed by a woman and it's for women. And that's why people are so mad at this. And maybe in a way, it's almost inspiring to see a female director not just make something so bad that was seemingly 100% her vision, but also be so annoying about it too, and have all her fans be so annoying about it too. Maybe this is what it's like to have a female Quentin Tarantino. Okay, but my thing is, I guess I want to ask why we should accept that one of the greatest works by a female artist is currently being flattened, even if it's by another woman. Like, I just don't think we should accept that. Why is it always that whenever this argument is employed, it's always aimed towards other women? I feel like had Jacob Elordi not been cast, people wouldn't have reacted so defensively of this movie. I felt like a lot of people were just defending it on principle because they wanted to just kind of get their rocks off. And at the end of the day, it's not even fun. Like, it's not even a fun, bad movie. A lot of people are like, oh, just let people have fun. And I'm not saying you can't have fun watching a dog shit movie. I love Madam Web. I am Dakota Johnson's biggest fan. But the thing is, it isn't. It's not even fun trash. And if you enjoyed it for reasons like you wanted to see Jacob Elordi shirtless, that's all right. Just say that. Do you guys know how many female directors would kill to have creative freedom over a $20 million film where they could seemingly do whatever they want? And do you know how many of them would have made something that would have moved you or touched you or even just like entertained you well? You don't have to defend the quality of a movie if a 5-minute compilation of Jacob Elordi taking off his shirt and then thrusting his hips tepidly can get you the exact same experience as watching this 2-hour and 30-minute film. And I think that maybe it's a position of privilege to be able to ignore some of the issues that this movie clearly has in order to get your rocks off. There are far less competent movies than Wuthering Heights out there, but the fact that there are moments of interesting choices in directions and performance occasionally peeking through, all in service for this weird, shock value, badly thought out, intentionally unintellectual, racist, also kind of sexist film. It's just really disappointing. It makes it worse than a normal bad movie. And isn't that kind of fucking annoying?